Pessoal, bom dia. Hoje nós estamos aqui com o professor Kozák, que vai nos apresentar um pouco sobre a questão de alguns aspectos dos mitos nórdicos, questões também relacionadas à questão da era viking com esses mitos, mas também pesquisas assim bastante interessantes que ainda também não foram ainda abordadas aqui no canal. Ele é, inclusive, da Universidade de Charles, que é localizado em Praga, na República Tcheca. Então, eu vou passar aqui a palavra para ele, para a gente iniciar esse bate-papo. Professor Kozák, thanks so much for accepting the invitation. It's a pleasure receiving you. You have a very interesting topics about Norse mythology that I was thinking that was interesting to bring this for the channel and present these aspects of your research.
Thank you so much, Marcia, for inviting me, and let's get into it.
Okay. So for our start, I would like to ask you, how do you start your interest for this subject? How do you start to try to comprehend the Norse mythology and develop this work?
Yeah, so of course, very early in my life, I had this like childhood meeting with Lord of the Rings, Hobbit, and Lord of the Rings. So that was for sure this kind of first inspiration. But when I went to study at the university, at the Charles University in Prague, I first started with religious studies, general religious studies, together with Latin, so philology. So I first I was focused much more on comparative approach. I was interested very much at the beginning for the first 3 or 4 years of the studies because it was connected with Latin and Greek. So I was into antiquity. I was basically doing my studies mostly focused on ancient Roman and Greek religion. But then all the time, next to these studies, I was on my own studying Sanskrit, going to Sanskrit lessons at the university. And I was also very much interested in Indian religion. And for some time, I even considered this would be my focus, for example, at my doctoral studies. But then just by a mere chance, a very intriguing and interesting teacher started teaching Old Norse language there. It started with Old Norse language. The name of this teacher is professor is Jiří Starý. He just moves around mostly around Czechia. He has much good connection to Munich University. So he's a Germanist by original education. And so he inspired me in this. And when I actually compared India and ancient Scandinavia, I feel that it's like polar opposites. So I had to choose between either enormous richness, endless cultural production, so many versions. India is a huge subcontinent of thousands of years of very interesting mythology, rituals, and stuff, or this Scandinavian minimalistic. We have just actually few texts compared to India. We don't have much. We don't know much about rituals. It's just always secondhand or reconstruction based on archaeology and stuff like that. So it's much more gentle, much more minimalistic. And I must say, after doing all these focuses on various ancient religions, I felt I need this little bit of minimalism. And also I somehow fell in love with Old Norse language. And also when I learned that contemporary Icelandic is grammatically very close to Old Norse, it was another hint, like, okay, I can learn a bit of also this living language. And it's so this my knowledge of something from medieval times actually helps me to understand some contemporary language. So yeah, so then I traveled to Iceland. I fell in love with the country, and then it was somehow sealed. So yeah, but I always retained this comparative approach. So I am a religious studies scholar, not a Scandinavist. So therefore, I try to focus on some more general topics. I like to. I feel strong, able to do comparisons with classical antiquity or let's say medieval Indian or yeah, classical Indian mythology from Puranas or Vedas. So this gives me some broader view. Yeah, that's my journey in a nutshell.
Yes, it's a very interesting journey because I think it's the first guest that mentioned the Indian mythology here
Yeah,
in the channel. It's very very hard. People research about this
yeah,
type of mythology, and you have many points that you say about the Norse mythology that's interesting you, and that's very fantastic to see
yeah.
how this change occur in your life.
And I also have this little bit maybe weird approach because for me, myth is a living thing. So, of course, we can study it as a historical phenomenon, but for me, mythology has not died out. We actually have some kind of contemporary mythology. Our imaginations about, I don't know, impending doom of our civilization is mythological. So, some kind of modern day Ragnarok is like the same similar ideas are around now. So we should not only study myth as a as like how should I, as some kind of antique that you just barely touch and look on from various perspectives, but let's not make it too alive. For me, that's very different. So I try to somehow touch the living myth, and even I, for example, I published in Czech for the time. I hope maybe it will be translated, but in Czech I published a book which is called Saga of Lundir, and it's fantasy, okay, but it's written in the style of Old Norse sagas, and it is so much. I put there at the beginning of the book this kind of scientific academic study of how I reconstructed from the manuscripts. Of course, they are. I mean, they are from the other world, okay, so they are not in this world, and so it's a playful stuff, and I'm happy that this book actually I find very often sorted wrongly in bookstores. It's not in the section of fantasy, but in the section of either legends or history or something else. So I like this also this playfulness with mythology. I think we should connect to it. And that's also another point that I'm also a psychotherapist. And for me, doing this kind of stuff should be always self-reflective. So how does it actually speak to me? The choices of the topics that we choose to study are not random. They reflect our questions, our deeper questions about ourselves, what we deem important. So I am very much against the attempt at be completely objective, because we never can be completely objective, but we need to be reflective of our subjectivity. So what we think about the stuff, what kind of arguments we bring forth, they are usually deeply connected with what we as a particular persons are, and this I think is also important.
Well, that's a lot of interesting. I was very curious about that saga that you are in your book because I never listened about that, and I was thinking, oh, this I think it's a new saga, or new, and you said me, oh, it's a fiction, and I was I was thinking that was real because it was very have many points of
Yeah.
rights that I think was a new saga that was discovered, and
Yes.
that's very interesting that you say that. For I start our conversation about mythology, we have to say that Odin was one of the most figures important that was present in the Norse mythology. You have a work that was analyzed the Odin myth, sacrifice, and initiation. And the interesting point of that is that you say we don't have so much. How can I say? That was some points. We have some researches, archaeological researches that show us that have rituals and some aspects of that was connected to Odin. But in some point, we don't have any right research that in that time that say, oh, we do it like that, proceed like that to doing the ritual. We only have the oral tradition that was difficult to analyze that because we don't have this how to say, oh, this is occurred like that in that time. How did you analyze this aspect in the Norse mythology? How the figure of Odin was connected to these aspects of some sacrifice, some ritual initiations in the Viking Age, and this is importance for the populations in that time?
Okay, yeah, this is actually a very difficult topic, I must say. So you are correct that we, for example, we have no direct report on initiations in the style that is described in Hávamál as a mythological motive. So Odin, as our listeners probably know, there is a famous passage in Hávamál where Odin says, "Je veit att je hjäck vindgamede au näitur atlarniu, geiri undatur og jevin Odini sjálfur mér á þeim meiði mangi veit hvers hann af rót ren." So I knew that I hung for on a windy tree, pierced by spear, given to myself, Odin, sjálfur mér, like given, like myself, I sacrificed myself for myself, and on the tree that nobody knows from which roots it runs. So this is this mysterious passage. It has no parallel in anywhere else, and we have, of course, story parallels where somebody is sacrificed, like, for example, the famous passage from Gautrek's saga, where the hero Starkadr has to sacrifice his king Vikar, where this sacrifice is done in a similar way. So, of course, hanging, piercing with a spear, and this is a sacrifice to Odin. So it seems, and we have, of course, we have some proofs, let's say, or independent reports on sacrifices by hanging. This is no problem. Sacrifices by hanging were done, most probably. But the question is, initiations, were they done? Was this just a mythological image that, in a way, gives us the background logic for the sacrificial practice, or was this some kind of report on some initiations that were really done? We don't know this, and it's always a speculation. So there is parallels, of course, somehow in circumpolar traditions. In Siberia, there are shamanic initiations, so we can, let's say, okay, this Scandinavia, but partly belongs to this, let's say, wider subculture, wider cultural milieu, where these practices might have been done, but again, speculation. Some believe in it, some don't. I wrote a whole book, unfortunately, again, just in Czech, but I wrote also an article in English about Odin's sacrifice, and I compared it to the myth of how Odin got the meat of poetry. So for me, what I argue in this English article is that actually the story of hanging of Odin and the story of getting the meat of poetry are as it were, two versions of the same story. So because while in the first myth, Odin hangs himself and is basically passively hanging there until the trial is over, then he somehow falls down, first reaches for the runes, then falls down, and then he is somehow accepted. He gets the magic songs, he learns runes, he's sprinkled with the mead of poetry, he gets to drink the sacred mead. So he, with this trial, he gets also to the mead of powerful mead, of course. It's actually not called mead of poetry, it's just the hindire mjöder, so this dear or exquisite mead. And yeah, so that is one path how he gets it. And the other story is completely different. It's, you know, full of adventure. Odin has to get into this mountain, has to seduce the daughter of the keeper of the mead. He changes his shape into snake. Afterwards, when he drinks the mead, he changes his shape into an eagle. He flies back. So, and there are many sub episodes where I will not summarize here, but it's such a colorful story. So my idea was that this there is this two-sidedness, which actually reflects the two-sidedness of any type of actually initiatory ritual. So when you are, for example, in some kind of trance, or when you go to sleep, when you cover yourself in a hide, which some traditions do, and there you try to reach for inspiration, you are, on one side, your body is passive, you cannot move or should not move, or you are in some way incapacitated, either hanging or lying or meditating or whatever, while your mind, as it were, or your internal, the other aspect of you, which is, described as Huger in Old Norse, for example, can get on this travel. And this is also in line in what Snorri writes about Odin's skills. So he could lie down, so it feels like he's dead or sleeping, while his soul or his his Hugur can travel to other world and do, find stuff and do stuff and so on. So this is okay. This is, of course, my argument that these two myths are basically reflecting the two sides of this process. Of course, other scholars would not agree. There is there is a quite a common opinion that this Snorri's report is based on a tradition, maybe like he takes inspiration from some traditions further to the east, from Sami or other traditions, and it's not really Old Norse way of doing things. But that's again up to opinions. There is always somebody a little bit more skeptical, somebody a little bit more open to this kind of interpretation. So this is let's say my work, and in this way I cannot prove initiations were done, but I somehow work with this hypothesis that if there was some kind of process of inspiration or initiation, then these two myths fit nicely to this. So I don't bring proof of its existence, but I bring one more argument for, let's say, considering this possibility. Yeah, and in my book I add two more myths to this, and I try to study them following more or less the ideas of Jens Peter Schött, who said that the initiation process, of course, it can happen in real life, in practice, but the same can happen on a narrative level. So mythology, Old Norse mythology, and Old Norse literature is actually filled with initiatory scenarios. Heroes are going somewhere else, either into the, let's say, into to fight a dragon or almost die somewhere, to change into wolves, like in Volsunga Saga, or for a time to be somewhere outside of society, or gods themselves go through this. Odin's travels to other world are very often, being subject to danger and then getting some kind of reward and getting more and more powerful, as it were, as the leader of the gods. So this initiatory scenario is everywhere in Old Norse mythology, and also in stories, either Fornaldarsögur, the sagas of the ancient times, or also in Íslendingasögur. From time to time we find these structures. So maybe they do not reflect a practiced ritual, but maybe they reflect some kind of need for this structure to explain reality. So for them, maybe this the gods need to constantly go into the other world, encounter something, and bring something back, because it helps the people of the Old Norse society to understand the cosmos. It's an explanation of how the cosmos works. Maybe it also reflects to a certain extent the activities of the Viking Age Northmen, right? They also traveled a lot into the other worlds and brought riches back. But I would not like to reduce it just to a reflection of this activity. I think it's a way how to explain on some deeper level the cosmic cosmology, how the world is built up. So it's so these structures, initiatory structures, can be so important for the culture, but they might just exist on the level of narrative, on the level of story. We don't know. There is, like, unfortunately, we don't know about the practice. It might be like there might be initiatory rituals. Its arguments against it are argumenta ex silencio, arguments based on silence of our sources. So it's always very difficult.
Yeah, you say an interesting thing about that, because we saw that some reflects in the Viking Age. We have a presence of images that was created in that time that reflect this that you say. Example, we have I think two important example of this myth of Odin, and the process of rituals in the Viking Age. The first is the Uzbek tapestry that we saw the hanged people in the tree.
Yeah.
To probably represent a sacrificial scene, and that was connected to Odin. And in a recent documentary produced by the Denmark TV, that was called God on Odin. I think in the series that showed that have a sacrifice in Trelleborg that describe children that was let me remember, that was that was sacrificed, and is these children was how can I say, was put in a well for the fathers. They pull off the children in a well, and these children are dead for the sacrifice, but have many possibilities of the other children are found in these wells, and have this representation probably for the eye of Odin that was taken off and put in the well. And that's interesting because I've had some of connections with that you say about these rituals. So that you say is probably that these myths are connected. And one of the curious things that I want want to say is how we can say that how much we can say that have this connection with the representation in the mid and the eye in your work, that you say that have the same that you say that have the same significance of that the eye and the mid, how they are have this connection.
You mean just the motive of the eye?
Yeah, the motive of the eye and the motive of the mid, how you say that
Yeah,
have the same representation for the sacrifice of
yeah,
Odin.
yeah. To me, this is such a powerful symbol. I mean, the it's also very strange if you read closely. For example, Völuspá, this serious prophecy. So the well at the tree is the mead. Of course, the mead again is there, flowing from Odin's ved. How is it in English? The thing that you get that you have to place as in exchange for something, right? So that's the eye. So Odin had to sacrifice the eye, and it seems like the mead is flowing from this sacrificed eye, and that's the source from which, for example, Mimir can drink every morning. So this is kind of paradox for me, because the well, as it were, it seems like was not there before the sacrifice, but he can drink from it only when the sacrifice is done. So it's maybe it's not even paradoxical. Maybe he first needed to sacrifice, and then the meat started flowing, and it's still there, the eye, as it were. And for me, there is this saying. I mean. Saying of like among the blind ones, one-eyed is the king, and I would say that Odin's the Odin's eye that really sees stuff is the one in the well, while the one that is usually seen is just let's say what's it called, the common eye, the normal one, the one that he shares with us. So I think that it is very strong symbol. Eyes also comparatively, they there is the motive of the eye in mythology has one thing that comes to my mind is of course the eye of Horus from Egyptian mythology, which was such a strong symbol. It's filled with meaning. Of course, completely different culture here. I would not dare to go there, but it also plays an important role. And what is interesting is this. Again, I would compare the difference of Indian culture versus the Scandinavian and like medieval Scandinavian pre-Christian culture, is that the symbolism, like in India, when you see more, like beyond, you have the third eye, or yeah, so that's one eye plus to add it to those two normal. So it's again the culture of abundance. While in the north, the same, like the fact that somebody actually sees more is represented by missing an eye. So there is I call this like this minimalistic, as it were, culture where things are rather toned down, like the representation is. But I think it's also connected with the sacrificial logic. So Odin is not the only one who sacrificed something for the to either help himself or help the world. So there is a very famous myth of binding of the wolf Fenrir, where the god Tyr is the one who dares to put his hand again as Ved. That's Old Norse. Again, I don't know how is it in English, actually. I'm limited now, but as this kind of like contra value, and of course, when the wolf is finally bound, he loses this hand, But this is again such an important sacrifice. If he didn't do this, the world would probably be already eaten by the wolf, because it was this kind of giant wolf, growing all the time, hungry all the time. So it's the, let's say, wolf of chaos or destruction. And so the chaos and destruction was bound thanks to this sacrifice. And there is even a third sacrifice, which is not, because it's connected with the god Heimdallr, and it's because we don't know much about Heimdall. He's the enigmatic god, as it's usually called, and we probably there probably were poems about him. One for sure we know, this lost poem of Heimdallar Galdur, Heimdall's magic poem, let's say, Heimdall's spell, or how should I put it? We have just 2 lines from it quoted by Snorri, but it must have been a whole poem, and probably much more stories about him. So there is just an allusion in Völuspá that he also hid. So Odin hid his eye. So it's folgit in Old Norse. It's hidden, and the same word is used for Heimdall's hljóð. And hljóð is a very strange, and I mean, like the word means many almost opposite things. Like it means voice, of course, but it also means it also means silence. It like at the beginning of the poem, the vulva asks, hljóð bid egg. So I ask for hljóð, which means I ask for silence, I ask for hearing. That's another meaning, right? And I ask for being able to speak, so for the voice. So it's like hearing, silence, and voice. That's 3 little bit strangely connected things. So Heimdall, in context of Heimdall, we know that he was he had a wonderful hearing, right? He could hear the grass grow, and he could hear the wool on sheep growing, and so it's reasonable to somehow read in this context hljóð as hearing. So he sacrificed, in the same way as Odin sacrificed his eye to see more, he sacrificed his ears or his hearing to hear more. So there are these 3 sacrifices. All of them, the gods lose something, but gain something much more valuable. So I read it in this context. But so this is important cosmologic concept. It's called. I think Georges de Mézil especially is interested in these wounded gods, these invalid gods, as it were. Because he finds it across the Indo-European sphere. Other personages in other cultures also have one less hand and one less eye, as for example in the Roman pseudo-history, Mutius Scaevola and Horatius Cocles, two important characters of the early history of Rome, also miss an eye and hand. But this image of the eye itself, of course, it can appear spontaneously within the culture, but I see many resonances to Irish folklore and Irish mythology. I don't say it comes from there, but I say that these two cultures were actually quite connected, especially when it comes to the colonization of Iceland. As you probably know, there has been a genetic study done on the genes of Icelanders, and they found out that while the Y chromosome line, so the father line goes to mostly Norway, what's it called, mitochondrial DNA, which is the mother's line, goes very, like, I don't know, 50% or even more to Ireland. So many women were probably forcibly transported from Ireland to Iceland, and it's quite, and even before that there were cultural contacts. So it's and of course not only cultural contacts, not only influences, not only like a lot of women rearing children, caring for, telling stories at the farms in the evening or something, but also the common tradition, like both Irish and Old Norse mythology is in the end connected through Indo-European commonality. Let's say they inherit some motifs, some stories from there. So in Irish context, there are many stories of wells appearing after somebody sacrifices an eye, so that it's not just it's not just one example. It appears often. There is also a very common conception of heads in wells, so in sources. So I think it. I mean, there is also some kind of natural imagination going on, right? This metaphors we use. So, for example, in English, fountainhead is one expression for spring or something. Okay, so as it were, where the river starts is the head of the river in some sort, while the river goes down until it has its feet in the ocean or something. So we project the body schema of our body onto many things. So of course, I don't know, things have ears, things have eyes, openings, mouths, so, and we can project even contrary body schemata onto one thing. So of course rivers have also mouths, right, at the bottom, where I said there should have been legs, but this is not systematic. It's like how we think, this kind of spontaneous production of metaphors. And one of the spontaneous production of metaphor is, of course, the source of water on our body is eyes. When we cry, we cry a river. So eye is very fitting symbol to be connected with spring, because from eye things flow. So I think both head and eye has this natural tendency to somehow gravitate towards this symbolic cluster. But I think that in some traditions this is really worked through, and it's very common. And Irish tradition, especially with its head cult and with this eye, I think Saint Brigid pulled her eye out, and there was a spring coming from it. So we don't know exactly, what influenced what, but I think there is a cultural connection, and those that want to have their knowledge expanded on the motif of the eye and the well, I would recommend studying Irish myth and Irish folklore next to Old Norse myth and folklore.
Well, that's interesting. And for me, is one of the most things that I was questioned every time that I saw the myths that involve the mead. Why the mead was, in some point, was chosen to represent these aspects in the life of the god Odin, or in the mythology, is the reconnaissance that it was a drink that was have this such of a lot of importance to mythology. Why this happen in the Norse mythology? The mead was have this. There's so because we have beer, have a lot of other drinks in the Viking that, but mead have a lot of importance.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, again, I would stress the comparative aspect. So in many mythologies of, at least I would speak for the Indo-European area, we find the image of some kind of mysterious, powerful drink of the gods, which gives them immortality or deeper knowledge or something. And so in classical antiquity, of course, it's the nectar of the Olympians. Very specific position has the Indian soma, which is a special drink drunk by the gods. In only one hymn, it is drunk by I think in only one hymn, it is drunk by people, but mostly the soma is prepared for Indra, the highest of the gods, and it gives him power to crush the darkness, or the serpent and stuff like that. So it is, and Indra is closer to Thor in some respects. So it's a slightly different configuration, but the image that gods have some kind of blissful, wonderful drink that gives them some powers is there too. And of course, when we go to the close neighbors, like again Irish mythology, there it is again red drink or mead is a symbol, very important symbol of sovereignty, of kingship, and there is even the goddess representing it, having many names. One of them is also meaning mead. So it is it is a drink that makes your head spin. It's something. It's a symbol of either power or knowledge or some kind of something which is actually difficult to describe, and therefore we need the mythical image. Okay, so it is very often myth speaks about stuff which has to be described through some kind of metaphor, image, because it's difficult. I always imagine it like imagine it if you were to travel to a real other world, some kind of other dimension, and you would have just a radio connection. You could not show it. You have to describe it. So what would you say? You would use our expressions like cloud or tree or something to describe something which is completely other. So you would say, there are these clouds, but of course they are not clouds. They are something weird and different, but you have no other words to speak about it. And in the same way, you would say, there are these mushrooms there, but they are not mushrooms. They are just something similar. So in the same way, I imagine that mythology is especially this, like, let's say, inspired poetic text that come from inspiration, try to describe something which cannot be easily described in other words. Mythology is the language of the concrete. That's the thesis of Claude Lévi-Strauss, the famous anthropologist, who said that that myth is work like when you try to build. He called it like bricolage. So when you try to build a new stuff from pieces of other stuff. So you use I don't know car wheel as a place for sitting. You use these sticks for the legs, and you have a chair. But if you look at the separate elements, it's just a piece of a car or something. So mythology is this bricolage, he says. So it uses various images to speak about something which somehow is best expressed by these very concrete images. In contrast to abstract thought, which is something philosophy and academia and science does, these concrete images have the ability to speak to our whole being. It affects us emotionally. It's much more effective and powerful to speak of the powers that make up the world in form of persons than to just describe I don't know, second I don't know, this weak or I don't know, like gravitational power. Okay, nice. It's a scientific concept, but we people are, most of us are actually thinking in concrete, and we abstractness keeps us away. So mythology is a strange discourse where things about like global thoughts about how the world works is expressed in this kind of fairy tale-ish concrete things. So and it's very often difficult to say what is the referent. So with this bricolayer who made the chair out of the car wheel, we know the referent is what he's trying to build is a chair. We could also have just a normal chair from some store, but in the case of symbols like the meat of poetry, it's very difficult to find a referent. I mean, like on the first at the first sight, we could say it should probably, it is a way how to express the process of inspiration. You know, of course, it's a mead of poetry. Poets drink it, so it's this mead. Also, it's a mead of some kind of insight, some kind of knowledge, let's say, of something hidden. So something around this. But also, of course, the mead is not it's not just honey they are drinking. It's mead. It's containing alcohol. So the drink makes you, I don't know, so inspired that you can lose yourself. It's you can, as it were, drown in it. And it's maybe this is what is alluded and at this passage in Havamál again, when Odin says, somewhere in the beginning actually of the poem, I think 16th or 17th stanza, he says that I was so drunk at the palace or at the court of or at the home of Gunnlod, and I was bound by the feathers. So it's such a wonderful image, this being bound by feathers. So he turned into the bird. Maybe it was not even his plan. The amount of inspiration that he had to imbibe made him a bird. So he suddenly flew, and it was a surprise, I imagine, for him even. So so it's not just a drink of sober insight and sober ability to see other worlds or something, or truth about the past or something, but it's also intoxicating. So it's something. It speaks about that some things are actually super weird when you venture in some areas of our soul or our universe. You get really drunk, you get weird. So I think that this mead of poetry tries to capture something which is like a real mystery, and I don't want to explain it completely, even if of course we can find some rather reasonable referent for it, like poetic inspiration, let's say. Yeah,
that's interesting. I was really thinking about that because every time that I read about this, I was thinking, oh, how this was chosen for have this so importance in the stories for of Norse mythology, and the media was a very interesting choice uh, to complement the stories, to use it in some aspects of Odin's life and of the gods. And this is very interesting point that you told about that. And one of the things that I was very, very curious in your research is about that you describe about the body symbolism in Old Norse mythology. And this, for me, was one of the most interesting research that I was read in recently aspects of that I was trying to find about about some aspects of the Norse mythology and to comprehend much more. And one of the things that I was to asking you how this how can I say how we can say about this body symbolism that was present in Norse mythology, and in if it is reflected in the Viking Age society, uh, in some point that some ritual or sacrificial or something that was used was reflected in this body's representation and symbolisms. Example, we can say that have some sacrifice that are related to people that have to lost the eye or lost the hand or something like that in the this exists, or was imagined for some series, or we can say that was present in real life, to a person that sacrificed his eyes to obtain some luck for a battle or some blast of Odin. It's possible to say about that in the uses of these symbolisms.
Okay, yeah. So here we again, I must be in I must little bit be skeptic in this way that we unfortunately don't have much again much text that would support I don't know regular sacrifice of an eye or something like that. So I treat all these things as mythological motifs, and I don't know whether they reflect in. I mean, like sometimes, yeah. I mean, of course, sometimes there is a touch with reality, but mostly I see them as I study them as these images that helped them parse the reality into meaningful into some meaningful system. So for me, this is a symbolic system, and we also have our symbolic system. It's much more complex, probably. It's now we have all these sciences, all these humanities, social, natural, and all these other sections divided. Also literature, poetry, all this kind of stuff. All this used to be one thing, as it were, right? It started all with mythology, and mythology was all of this together. It was psychology, it was natural science, it was social science, it was everything together. So mythology gave answers to how society is composed, why there are why there are slaves, why there are jarls. There is mythology gives an answer to how the universe, basically to natural science questions like where the water comes from, where the mountains come from. It also, as it were, always is a psychology at the same time, because the old cultures did not. We are now. Our culture is dualistic. We separate, let's say, psyche from the body. Body is studied by the physicians, and psyche by psychiatrists, psychologists, and so on. So it's divided, and it's a separate realm, right? Our imagination, our emotions, and stuff like that are treated as this internal sphere. But the pre-dualistic cultures, like the Old Norse one, the psyche and the world were like one thing. It was not distinguished. So and we still have it in a way. For example, but I don't know if it's maybe in Portuguese you find examples of this. In Czech there is so many expressions that the weather is somehow used for describing our moods. So when it is cloudy or something, in Czech there is like really words based on this. So there is this analogy of weather, stormy and so on, with our emotional states. So and of course we project the body onto almost everything. I already mentioned this. Like so the hills have foothill, right? Then there are these upper parts can be described as heads. Also, heads are heads of companies, heads of states. Heads, feet, all even just page has header and footer, right? So we project the image of the body on objects. If you have a picture, it has a head, it has a butt, or how different languages speak about it, but you will find it everywhere. This is not specialty of Czech or English or any other specific language. And so this is one important thing. We find our body everywhere. The table has legs. Some arms. This armchair has arms. So this is here, always present. The moods are always somehow connected with the weather. So it's not by chance that anger and this kind of states. So even Thor's emotionality, like his easiness to get to angry state, reflects how storms are, right? They are first cloudy. This sometimes this inside lightnings look like red eyes of Thor watching us, and then finally the anger gets out, and there is big lightnings hitting the ground, and then the showers come. And so it is an emotional process, and we empathize with it. We are fearful at the moment when the storm comes, and then we maybe feel also a release because there is a pressure before the storm and different pressure afterwards. The fresh air comes, and so this is always so deeply connected. And so we basically anthropomorphize everything around us, and we live in an anthropomorphic world. And even more it was in the past than we have it today, because we have become much less poetic, much more I would say rational, distinguishing precise scientific categories and stuff like that, while mythology is much more flamboyant in this. It's like going in with everything: emotion, colors, faces, characters, and ginormous things like cosmic wolves and apocalypses and stuff like that. So it's so there is a much more space for this kind of anthropomorphization, and I find it also. Of course, I try to find some kind of system in it, because I am again still a scholar, not just a writer or poet or something. And I found nice way how to look at it, because there are 4 so-called master tropes: metaphor, metonymy, irony, and metaphor, metonymy, synecdoche, and irony. And so the myth reflects this. So these metaphors, or these tropes, are mastered because they reflect the basic ways how our mind even works. So we connect things based on certain principles. One principle is analogy. So when something is similar to each other. this is metaphor. So when, for example, waves have these white crests on top, it can be easily described as maidens or ladies with white flowing hair or white flowing dresses or something. So that's also the case in Old Norse, right? There are many, for example, the riddles in Hervarar Saga, which is, by the way, one of my books, again, of course, in Czech, but I produced a bilingual edition of Hervarar Saga and one whole volume of commentary, and I hope I will let this be translated to English at some point, but for now. So there are riddles in Hervarar Saga where the riddle says something like, what are these ladies with the white scarves? And the answer is waves, always. So that's based on metaphor, by similarity. Then the other system of connection is by touch. So things that are usually next to each other or that once were next to each other are connected. So, for example, Thor and his hammer. So it is his tool, and he's somehow unthinkable without it. There is a clear connection. So my mythological example, actually, of the first one, of the metaphor, is how the world was even created. So that's there was an ancient giant, Ymir, and he used to be, enormous entity. Then the first gods, Odin, Vili, and Ve, sacrificed him or killed him, and from his body the various parts of the world were made. So from his skull is the sky, is the heavens or sky. From his brain are clouds based on similarity of shape, right? Of his blood is all waters, sea. Of his hair are trees, as it were, growing on the surface of the body, and so on. From his bones are mountains, and so on and so on. So this is based all on similarity. The other way, the contact way, is how, for example, gods are connected to their animals. So Freya to the sow, to the female pig, female boar, right? Or to their equipment, like Odin to his spear, is based on contact. It's associated with him with a contact. And these two mechanisms actually are so powerful that they also appear in this kind of in magic, very often in magic. So in magic, if you want to harm somebody, and I'm not now speaking very generally because this actually appears in many cultures. This is quite a universal thing, not only Caribbean voodoo or something. It's very often present. So if you want to harm somebody, you have to have something that used to be attached to them, like their possession or their handkerchief, their watch, whatever, or even piece of their hair or something. And then you can do the magic trick, or you make an effigy, or you use the photograph or picture of the person. And so this is based on similarity. So touch and similarity. And these two principles are also present in psychology very often. Already Sigmund Freud observed that his neurotic patients, when they had some problems, they spread usually along these two lines. So, for example, when something was taboo for them, they had phobia about something. The phobia spread through associations. So, for example, when they saw, I don't know, type of shoes that the person that harmed them, or was the cause of their trauma on somebody else, they felt this sudden attack of anxiety when they, of course, saw somebody similar, or even they could not enter a street where they lived, and so on, based by touch or based by similarity. So this is really how our mind works, and this is reflected in mythology so strongly. The other two cases are these synecdoche, that is pars pro toto and totum pro parte. So, for example, part of the body represents the whole person, or vice versa. So usually it's the part of the body somehow contains the whole person. My cases are a Kvasir, who is killed, the wisest of beings, who is killed, and only his blood survives in the form of a mead of poetry. But the principle of Kvasir, even the name Kvasir, it's actually somehow probably connected to Slavic languages, because kvas means this fermentation in Slavic languages. So Kvasir is a fermenter or something like that. And so this is retained in his blood, and the whole power of his being is in his blood. So pars pro toto. And similarly, Mimir has his head survives, and it contains all of his wisdom, and he was even before the wisest. So his hands were not that important. The thing that was important was his head. So this is pars pro toto principle reflected in mythology. And the last one, what is called irony, but I call it maybe antonymy. Maybe irony is not that bad. Is actually what we already talked about. It's the Odin not having an eye, missing an eye, but seeing more, which is ironic, as it were. The reverse. So he's not half blind. He's even more seeing. And the same with the other two, with Heimdall and Tyr. So what I claim is that these principles of thought that appear in various cultural contexts and in our random ways how to see things, how some words came to be, and so on, these are not some kind of ornament on top of rational language, but they are the core of our thinking. And mythology does what? Mythology does that this core is somehow brought to plain sight and showed us in the form of these stories. So it is, as it were, an analysis of our way of thinking, which is projected in the form of these stories. So that's my claim. I know it's a little bit abstract, but I hope it shows something about how mythology can help us even understand how our minds work, and how the minds of the people from the, let's say, 900 or 1000 AD worked specifically.
Oh, you told us very, very interesting points about that. That was.
Sorry, I have just one note. In this article, of course, I wrote in, I don't know, 5 years ago, and I put some version of it online on my Academia Edu, but it will be published because it's still sitting. The collective monograph from the conference is still in production after 5 years. So this was actually my flagship article. So I think one thing that is really original and it's interesting, but it's still not published. But readers can find it, some version of it, some older version of it on Academia, and I hope it inspires them.
Oh, that's interesting, because I saw this is in the academy, and this is giving me so much attention, and I say, oh, that's very, very interesting to saw that, because I don't was thinking and in this idea, because I have no idea that the importance of to analyze this part, and for the, how can I say, an aid for this aspect of the body's parts involved in Norse mythology, and this is caught my attention, and this is very very interesting to solve. And for the last question for you, I would like to that you explain about this project, Sim Odin, that was described in this part of the article that you say. How does this project that you develop called Sim Odin?
No, it's just there's this grant scheme or type of grants provided by the European Union, and they are called Marie Sklodowska-Curie fellowships, and it's a very nice scheme. It allowed me to live for 2 years in Bergen, where I developed my thinking about mythology and did some serious research. And the product of this stay are 4 articles, which are connected through the common theme of this kind of, let's say, metaphors or connection based on similarity or contrast, and they are all analyzing various types of various mythological narratives. And it's not only about this symbolism. So the project name is Symbodin, right? Mm-hmm. And it's nice because it contains all these 3 topics that were somehow combined. So Symb is allusion to symbolism. Body is the research on the body metaphors, and Odin is one of the focuses. Okay, foci. So of the project. So I was always it was a connection of these three topics, and I wrote four academic articles which are all in English and are published in various places. One of them is published in Temenos, this Nordic journal of religious religious studies, and I'm very proud of this article. And it's, I must say, the weirdest one, and it's about. I claim there that the Ragnarok, that the end of the Old Norse cosmos, is a mirror image of the process of creation, and that they are actually the same process seen from 2 different sides. And so this is a really and my inspiration is the Slovenian philosopher Slavoj Žižek and his analysis of the Jewish New Year rituals of sounding the horn, and how the year connects itself in this circular structure. So I was so nicely surprised when this article was accepted, because I think it was at the same time very original, at the same time a little bit crazy. So this is open access. You can find it on Temenos journal, and then 2 articles I published at the Viking and Medieval Scandinavia journal. One of them is open access, which is this Odin sacrifice, and one of them is unfortunately behind paywall, because at the time when it finally got published, I was already not employed by Bergen University, which could finance it. So in Prague, it was much more difficult to find finances for paying for open access. So this closed access article is interpretation of it's a comparison, again, based on finding similarities, a comparison of the story of Völundur, the famous smith of legend, of Germanic legend, and the story of Odin's journey for the meat of poetry. And I find it like interestingly close, because both of them actually are first let down. If I use the story in Hávamál, Odin is first trying to seduce some woman, and she doesn't let him. He's let down, and immediately the story of Gunnlod and her seducing, which is successful, appears, and then he steals the meat, and then he changes into a bird and flies away triumphant, while the woman is there sitting and not being happy, and her father is angry. So this is the image, and the same image also we find at the story of Völundr, where he first has some previous woman. They, in contrast to Odin, they actually were together for many years, but in the same way as in the case of Odin, the woman at the end somehow lets him down and leaves for no reason we know of. It's a mysterious leaving, maybe because they are swan maidens, these women. And then he also gets in some kind of some kind of house of this king being, this keeper of something, and he also seduces his daughter, and he also turns into bird, and he also flies away, and the woman is also crying, and the father is also angry and sad, and so this kind of so maybe there is some common ideology behind it, maybe yeah. So I try to come up with some ideas regarding this. So that's the third article, and the fourth one is still in waiting because that's the body symbolism. So the project was yeah, it was a great thing. I just would recommend to any let's say student who is you know let's say has had his master's or something to try this Maria Curie fellowship. It's great because it doesn't pressure you so much into enormous publishing. I mean, 4 articles is nice for 2 years, but it's not that strict about this. It's more strict about actually joining forces, teaching there. I mean, like transmitting your knowledge, getting the knowledge from the target institution, getting yourself into. I mean, like thanks to this, I started organizing conferences, and I really got into this international sphere. And before, I still write. I published, I don't know, 6 books or something, but they are all in Czech, because I also don't want to, as it were, forget my my country. I want to inform the public. I want to give them something. Yeah, so I have this mixture, like books in Czech, articles in English, and there is more coming. So, but I am forbidden to say where it will appear because it's a secret. But yes, but it will come.
Oh, that will be a very, very interesting. I think when the audience of the channel see, I think they will have the expectation to see the future works that you develop, and will be like to research about that future articles, books that you develop, because have a lot of interesting material that you put in the academia, and this is show me attention, and I was thinking, oh, this is very, very interesting to have this guest for the channel, because I never saw some perspectives that you put in the articles, and for me this is great news, and I think was a great interview that we do here today, and thank you so much for doing the interview. I have a lot of things that I learned today, and I think audience of the channel will be very pleasure with this knowledge. Thank you, again for participation, collaborate with the work here in the channel.
Okay. Thank you so much also for inviting me. Thank you for your questions, which were very interesting. And yeah, and I was happy to appear here. And yeah, just still one more thing, if because I want to actually recommend, my experience in Bergen was great. Is Professor Jens Eike Schnall, who was coordinating my stay there, so was such a great host. So if you consider going to Scandinavia, or any of the listeners, you may try Bergen and Eike. And if you consider coming to Prague, I'm here, and you can always contact me, and I'd like to actually help anybody with their studies in the form of some, let's say, project of this sort. Anyway, it was really nice talking to you, and I'm also saying hi to all the listeners, and I hope they took something from my talk.
Oh, thank you so much. It was amazing to have this conversation, and it was I think was a very very good experience to know about some topics that we have sometimes have some doubts about that, and this is very interesting to comprehend and understand much more how this subject works, because Norse mythology it's have infinite possibilities to comprehend, and it's a I think it's a topic that was never will be discussed. We have to be every time discovering new things about that. And this is very very nice. Thank you. I will just stop the recording.